it's kind of, well, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle there a little bit, but all is good.
I don't have a real green screen in this studio. In my one in the South, I have one, but not here.
Ah,
Well, folks, thanks for joining us. I am John Najarian. He is Pete Najarian. John Farrow is running the board for us today. Jared will be mixing a little later, but we appreciate all of you joining us for The Rebel's Edge, episode 266 on the 10th of October. So, Pete, let's kick it off with the macro minute. And as crazy as it seems, yesterday when Pete and I were looking at that massive turnaround in the markets, and we were both kind of shaking our heads and saying, maybe it's the plunge protection team. They're working overtime, Pete. The plunge protection team, as part of the macro minute, is doing their best to hold the markets. And today they're saying it's because, interest rates came back down to 4.66% on the 10-year, Pete. Okay.
well, John, it is interesting because we're getting these moves that are exaggerated and kind of crazy, and whether it's the 2-year, the 10-year, or the 30-year, and we've been talking about all three now. We've seen a little bit of a pullback. Is that little bit of a pullback enough to get people that excited? Apparently it is, unless the plunge protection group is out there and going, hey, look, this is what you're going to do. But it is interesting to watch, John. We have come off a little bit. You look at the 2-year that was over 5%. It finally pulled off of that, at least a little bit. So I guess you can rest your hat on that. But to your point, I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that maybe we don't always know enough about. And by the way, yesterday, volumes were down. So it was very easily manipulated yesterday for sure.
Yeah, we see that on low volume days. And yesterday it was Indigenous People or Columbus Day, depending if you're up there with Pete or down here with me in Puerto Rico. Because Puerto Rico, Pete, they didn't go for that Indigenous Peoples thing, but they did celebrate Columbus Day. Again, one of theirs. All right, let's take a look at fantastic futures.
Love it.
And the fantastic futures, Pete, are exactly what I started off at the top with, and that is the rates have come down, but they've basically come down to where they were last Thursday, prior to that jobs report that spiked them up to 489 on the 10-year. So that's the fantastic futures from me.
Well, I've got one for you, John, and this one is pretty interesting because suddenly today the whole world has decided, well, there's Fed chatter out there. The Fed's talking about this, that, and the other, and there's a lot of guys that are saying maybe we're done. We might not rise again and raise it again. Well, maybe, but I think the mistake that's being made right now maybe is the fact that they're just looking ahead and saying, well, what's it look like at the next one? Well, a month ago, it was 53% that they were going to pause. Then it was 72% a week ago. You know what it is today? 86% that they're going to pause. I think that's what people are staring at right now, John. I think they're looking right at that and saying, we're not going to rise this go around. I don't think that means that they're done raising rates necessarily. Doesn't mean that they might not. Maybe they pause. Maybe they say, you know what, we are done. But John, we've heard what every single time from the Fed chair. We need it to be 2%. Well, it ain't 2% yet. And so I don't know that you want to immediately just assume that they are done. So I think you got to keep that in mind as we traverse through this. Up 200 points yesterday on the Dow, up 200 points today on the Dow. That's all great, but I don't know if you want to get too giddy about this whole thing just yet.
Yeah, I would think you're right, Pete. Well, let's talk a little bit about some stocks because, that's kind of what we do. And Coherent, COHR, up pretty big today, Pete. Up before the market was up 200 points. This one was up 13%. Mitsubishi Electric and Denso are going to invest $1 billion in one of their businesses. So this is a vertical collaboration with Coherent. and it seems like it'll be awfully good for their bottom line going forward, Pete.
Yeah, the strategic part of this relationship is great. I think this gives them a great opportunity and the exclusivity, not 100%, but certainly you want to have your supply chain there. And that's, I think, what they're looking for right now. And they're getting that. And so, it's Compound Semiconductor, and they are going to be with Mitsubishi and Denso. And so I think when you look at this whole thing, how about the fact, John, that when you do look at it, this is a stock that's now trading at 34, 35, somewhere in that ballpark or whatever. 26 was the lows, but over 60 points on the highs. So it makes you wonder, this thing could have a little bit of room to run. I know it's up today pretty significantly, but I think this thing potentially could be a lot higher than it is right now, maybe even test up to those levels. So I've gotten very interested in this because of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And 500 million here, 500 million there, you get $1 billion. That seems like a good start to get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Coherent being the major beneficiary, at least today, of that partnership, if you want to call it that. Yeah. All right, let's talk about one of the banks that you like so much, Pete, Truist Financial. They're in talks to sell their insurance business. And that is why this stock is moving to the upside pretty nicely.
Yeah, this private equity firm interested in that could be very good for Truist as well. But a lot of it has to do with the regulators and how they want things to line up. This is a nice bounce for the stock. It was up significantly more. It kind of eased back a little bit off of that. But, they want the banks to take care of business. They want them to do their business. And we're starting to see a little bit more of that getting pushed onto some of these banks and taking away a little bit of the diversification that some of them have wanted to get into. So for today, at least, this is good for Truist. I don't know in the future whether or not this is something that they wanted to be, they wanted to make a lot of money off of this or not. Could they? They could, but I think this is a good opportunity right now for them to have this type of a move.
$10 billion price tag for that insurance business, folks. So Truist is right now about a $40 billion company. And if you take that insurance business off of it, you would think that even if they get paid the $10 billion, they might suffer a little bit, but time will tell. Yeah. All right, let's focus in, Pete, on Unity Software, symbol U. And this one is up because the gentleman who was the president, chief executive, and chairman of the game development company is apparently resigning, and as he is, or retiring. And as he does so, the stock rockets to the upside. So maybe they're not as impressed with him as he probably is with himself.
Well, and he made a lot of mistakes towards the end, John. He was trying to do things that was not accepted very well by the public, and they were pretty ticked off about it. They had to backpedal away from it. And anytime you see a CEO who's not going to be there to kind of help the next CEO get acclimated and get into it and everything, I think that alone is a pretty big statement. They want him out. He's out. You know who's in, though, John? And that's why we might be seeing this move as well, at least temporarily. But James Whitehurst. Now, that's a name that you might not remember from the past, but Red Hat, former CEO of Red Hat, pretty amazing company. A lot of incredible things that they did for a long time before they got into a deal. I'll tell you what, I think if they could ever figure out a way to get him to be the CEO permanently, John, not just as an interim, that could be something big. Unity is a company that, long ago was up in the stratosphere for the prices that it hit. It has absolutely dropped like a stone, but with the right sort of driver, and I think Whitehurst could be that type of a person, this is a company that certainly could have a nice, bright, sunny ride to the upside. So I'd keep a close eye on this one and keep a close eye on what they're doing about the CEO and who might be the permanent CEO. Because if it's Whitehurst, I would be in a second.
Well, that would be a ringing endorsement. And you're right, Pete. It's rarely just one thing when a CEO, chairman, and president step down. It's very possible that they are looking forward and saying, maybe there's a real chance that we do get this guy, and time will tell. All right, let's talk about Akero, because this one, Pete, down almost 70%. Results were mixed. That's the nicest way they can say it for their lead product candidate, which was going through phase 2B trials for a non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, whatever the heck that is, Pete. I guess fatty liver, huh?
Yeah. Well, John, we all want these guys to win. We want these companies that are working on these drugs and these treatments and all this wonderful stuff, biotech companies. We want it to work. But in this particular case, it just doesn't look like it's working, John. And here's the problem. They don't have anything out to the public yet. They're working on the pipeline. That's great. The pipeline is very small right now. I think when I looked, they had maybe 3 different treatments within the pipeline, none of which were past phase 2. This is not past phase 2 either. And why is that? Well, because it turns out it's not really any more effective than, as you and I were talking about, basically a sugar pill. I mean, it's just not there. And it's really disappointing because the company still believes in it. But when you look at those results, the results speak volumes. And for right now, anyway, they just aren't in the right spot. Now, hopefully they will be, because this is something that, our father, John Najarian with an H, John, that guy was brilliant. And let me tell you something. He wanted the best for everybody and wanted the best, especially in kidney, pancreas, and liver. Well, this is involving the liver, and I'm sure he would have wanted to see exactly what these results look like as well. But unfortunately, those results aren't looking all that great. And we talk about it all the time. Even if you get past phase 3, can you get to the FDA to get that approval? And right now we go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then to that approval process. This is phase 2, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere from here right now.
Well, and the stock was like a $10 stock, Pete, in 21, and it spiked all the way up to like 58 or 60, maybe something like that. Now it's 15. But it spiked up on the hopes that that drug, that fatty liver treatment, would be a big success, because the early looks, the phase 1 trials, seem to be very positive. Phase 2 and phase 2B, not so much. And that's why this is seeing that 68-point decline today. 16 million share turnover. Oh, that's only like 20 some odd times normal volume, Pete.
Yeah, the volume is absolutely extraordinary, to be honest with you, John. And it happened right out of the gate, and it's just stayed on it all day long. How about the fact of this 52-week lows, like you were talking about? I mean, this is a stock that in the last year has been anywhere between 16 and 58. And here we are trading 15, 16. Not so good, tough results. It's going to be a rough ride for this company. And, when you get a biotech company, John, they do have a decent balance sheet, so they can survive this. But you know what? Not for very long. It's one of those where, you're burning cash. You're not taking in any cash. You're burning it. You got nothing out there in the field yet. So it is an issue. And, they might need to find somebody else to back them if they can, because they might at some point start needing a little bit more money.
All right. Well, what do you got as far as the best matchup coming up for NCAA football, Pete?
Well, I think it's always fun, John, because you and I have talked a lot about this over the last few months, but the Pac-12 is the best conference in all of college football, in my opinion, this year. And we talked about yesterday how diverse we are seeing the strengths this year as well, because you've got Georgia in the SEC. They look fantastic. You got Oklahoma and Texas in the Big 12. That's outstanding. You got Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, which I forgot to mention, in the Big 10. But you go out to the Pac-12, John, you got Washington State, Oregon State. You've got USC, UCLA. I mean, you are loaded with great teams this year. So I thought it would be fun to look at what is the best game of the week. It's got to be number 8 Oregon against number 7 Washington, up there in Washington. And John, we're talking about some offenses like we have not seen in a very long period of time. Michael Penix, one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, should be in the Heisman race. Bo Nix, one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, should be in the Heisman race. Now, I get it. USC, that quarterback, Caleb Williams, he's a stud. That guy's touchdowns to interceptions this year are outrageous. They don't play any defense at USC. They just basically say, look, we hope you trip so that at some point you get to a fourth down, you kick it, and we stopped you. And then the offense is coming back out to score another touchdown. But these teams, actually, Oregon, John, they have the number 6 defense in the entire country in terms of points against. 11 points they're giving up per game. And we're getting deep enough that these numbers actually matter. So I look at that game, John. They also run the ball a lot, which is one of the reasons why even Bo Nix, as good as he is, his numbers are not what Michael Penix look like or Caleb Williams right now, but they're great. But he doesn't have quite the same numbers. You know why? They're averaging 230 yards rushing per game. So this is a team that's very diverse. It should be a heck of a game. Unless you got a better game out there, John, what do you think of this game, or what game would you pick as the game of the week?
No, that is the game of the week, Pete. You're right. And my question to you might be, if it were being played in Oregon, would they be favored by 2? Because right now Washington is giving 2 to Oregon because, as you said, they're hosting the Ducks, but they've lost 16 of the last 21 times they've played. But to your point, they've never had Penix before playing in quarterback, which they do have this year, and he looks amazing. I was looking at the top teams, Pete, and one thing that was still surprising to me is I don't know how Louisville is 14th after beating Notre Dame and being undefeated.
Yeah.
They didn't just slip by them. They were beaten up on Notre Dame. Again, that's a team that's sort of like Oregon. Nobody really wants to play them because they're going to hurt you. I look at some of the teams. Should Texas be ahead of them after a loss? Yeah, I suppose. Should Alabama be ahead of them? I suppose, but these are legacy picks. It's not based on what they've done this year. It's based on, they just reload. They've got all these great players and they just, plug and play. And as you said, Alabama got off to a pretty damn slow start and lost to Texas. I think that Louisville is going to continue to surprise, Pete, and they are not in any of those big conferences that you've talked about or spoken about. Yeah. So this is one that I think if you get a chance to see them on TV, take a look and see what you think. But you're right. I think Oregon, Washington, this is going to be a great game. It's probably one of the top matchups of the year because Texas and Alabama, that was great early on. And then Texas losing the Red River to Oklahoma last week. That was a great matchup. But I think this might be the best one of them all.
Yeah, and we just got to hope for the fact that it's a great game. I mean, it would be, we don't want to see a whole bunch of turnovers and one team kind of bombs the other team. We'd love to just see these guys play at their best and see how they do, because I'll tell you what, John, I'm very, very impressed by the Pac-12. And anybody who's listened to me over the last few years talking anything on college football knows that I've been as critical as anybody about the Pac-12 and the fact that they don't play defense and the fact that they all these other things. But I'll tell you what, this year they are absolutely on fire, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that game will be fun. It's kind of interesting, John. College football is right now at that point where we got games on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then Saturday. I mean, it is football nonstop, and it's unbelievable. And by the way, last thing I'd say about Louisville, and you pointed out, Brom, who was a quarterback there, is the head coach there. He's doing a heck of a job. He was at Purdue, did pretty well there, but struggled. Big Ten's tough. And that conference is, it's loaded top to bottom, but he's doing a heck of a job at Louisville, and the recruiting and everything he's done has been impressive, to your point. I mean, this is a team that if they keep winning, they will get to that point where they're going to be somewhere, John, because you can't deny them. They've played some of the very best, and they'll play even more as they go on. How about this, though? So people are watching football like they've never watched it before, and people could say to me, well, but what about the NFL? I mean, the NFL is kind of boring. A lot of crappy games this year. Really? Well, I got something for you, John. How about the ratings? First of all, are up another 2% this year. And we're talking about monstrous runs in terms of better year for the NFL. Well, they're up again, but how about this one? The 49ers Cowboys game just the other night, right? 29.6 million viewers hit it at the peak. I mean, that's a number that you haven't seen ever, by the way. And outside of that, how about this? They averaged 26 million during the broadcast. So they peaked somewhere in the middle or the upper part of the second quarter of that almost 30 million viewers. And right now, if you look back to last year and the year before, they're averaging about 17 million viewers. So the fact that they had 26 million watching that, basically that entire game, I think that they're doing a lot of things right. Goodell's doing a lot of things right. Not everything. He still hasn't fixed that thing with some of those players that are on the practice squad that should be suited up and only if under emergency be there to play, including a third quarterback. But I got to give him credit when credit's due. They are exciting, and we are watching this year, John. You never know who's going to win a game. I mean, there's great teams, but how about, for instance, one of the worst teams in football this year, the New York Giants. Last year, they beat the Vikings in a playoff game. The coach was coach of the year, and now they can't win a game. And then you look at Belichick, and he can't win a game. It's unbelievable. So the parity within the NFL is really starting to show up now. And there's teams like Jacksonville who are pretty damn good. And, you even go out the Chargers, the Rams playing pretty daggone well. Even Arizona is playing better than they had been playing. The only terrible team out there that's really, really, really bad is coached by a guy who wanted to voice his opinion against another guy. And let me tell you, Sean Payton, you're on the worst team in football. They only got $100 million just on the defensive side of the ball, John, and yet they can't stop anybody. It's on. Breece Hall this past week ran for damn near 200 yards against them for the Jets. It shows you a lot about it, but I'll tell you what, the ratings are up, and it's really impressive for the NFL.
Well, Sunday Night Football, to your point, Pete, that Cowboys 49ers game, 26.1 million. That's a record for Sunday Night Football. A record that might stand for quite a while. So congratulations to the 49ers. They deserve the accolades. You know who doesn't? Even though I like the player, I like Mahomes, I like Kansas City, but oh my God, the officials have fallen in love with this team. Pete, against your Vikings, Pete was doing his live radio show, folks, and I was pinging him just saying, what in the hell is going on? In the final play there, folks, the Vikings quarterback, Kirk Cousins, is back there to try to deliver a strike to the end zone to tie the game and or win it, depending if they go for two. They're trailing 20-27. What happens? Well, let's see. He gets hit late and hard and gets flagged. A flag flies. Then the player he's throwing the ball to gets damn near tackled in the end zone. Flags fly. And then the player who did the tackling of the receiver, he didn't really tackle him, but he grabbed him and held him, just like against the Jets the week previous. So he grabbed him and held him. Then when he was flagged, he pulled off his helmet. That's unsportsmanlike. So there are 3 flags on that one play. So the Zebras get together and they look at it, Pete, and they decide, because Mahomes is on the sideline doing this, Pete.
He deflected the ball. Yeah.
Meaning the ball was deflected. And if the ball is deflected, he is right. If the ball is deflected, then there isn't interference because the path of the ball and the delivery time on the ball, the timing between the defensive player and offensive player, that can be disrupted, except that this guy was being held. And then the guy takes off his helmet. But on review, Pete, the ball was not tipped. Kirk Cousins' arm was hit right like here as he delivered the pass. That's not a tipped ball. If the officials want to crown him as we would say, crowning. If you want to crown this team just because Travis Kelce is dating Taylor Swift, go ahead. But, just why even bother playing the rest of the games then? If you're going to turn your back on all of these holding calls and so forth, on all of these penalties, and just say, Patrick, Kelce, I thought that was just terrible officiating. It was bad for football. And, I'm sure they're all just looking around to see where Taylor is and if they can get to the sidelines and get maybe an autograph or something.
Well, she wasn't there, but we like to call that, John, in Minnesota, we like to call that a good old-fashioned home cooking. I'm just kidding. But you know what? You're right. And I will say this, over the years, and they need to fix this, the referees are getting older or not able to keep up with the talent levels of the players on the field. And they've got to fix that, because as good as those players are, those refs have to be somewhere in the ballpark. They've got to. That's why, believe it or not, there are a few former players who've gone into this whole thing, college players, pro players, whatever. And it's why they're there, because they have that ability to be able to keep up and understand exactly everything that's going on. So I can tell you firsthand, I've played high school football with a guy who is now, I think he's reffed maybe 4 or 5 Super Bowls, John. And he stays in unbelievable shape, because that's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. And I think sometimes it's a lack of judgment, but also sometimes it's a lack of being in the right place to be able to make the right call. And I think that's one of the mistakes that the NFL does still have, is they've got to improve those referees, because it's not just that game. There's a lot of games where you look at it and go, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But you're right. That was a little home cooking, I guess, on that one. But, we'll take it from the Vikings, because we're used to losing here sometimes, John. I mean, we've lost 4 Super Bowls. We haven't been to now at least the baseball team's advancing. So we're getting somewhere.
Well, folks, we will be back tomorrow with another Rebels Edge, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We thank all of you for joining. We hope you join us again tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And thank you, Pete. We'll see you guys tomorrow.